Here we go, back again with another episode of the Around the Show Sports Podcast. As always, this is your host, Kyle Showalter, and if you couldn't tell, we're doing this one solo tonight. It's our first solo episode of the Around the Show Sports Podcast since we took it to the video platform. And for those of you that have been around for a while, you do know that we did this solo for a long time when it was just audio only. I put out about 20 episodes just by myself, but this is the first one that we've done on camera by ourselves. So I'm interested to see how it goes. Never been on camera solo before. Have to look directly into it, so it's going to be a little bit interesting. Last time that we talked, Brandon and I got to talking about the NBA Finals. We both predicted dubs in 6. Warriors did end up taking that series in 6, so super cool to see those guys go out there and get it. Steph Curry, shout out, finally a Finals MVP, finally cemented as an elite playoff performer. It was super cool to see. There was a lot of shit talking going on during that series with some nefarious chants coming from that Boston crowd. Klay Thompson firing back. The parade was absolutely electric. Steve Kerr was hammered getting off the plane. It was awesome. It was awesome to see all of that. I know Brandon and Christian would both have a ton to say about it if they were here, but it is just me tonight. So we're going to go ahead and jump into some of the stuff that's been going on recently, and we're going to circle back to something that Brandon and I actually covered in extensiveness last week. And that's going to be the DeShaun Watson saga and what seems to be a never-ending cycle of issues for the new Cleveland Browns quarterback. So the new news that came out is that DeShaun Watson has now settled with 20 of the 24 women alleging sexual assault against him. And folks, this is where it's going to start to get interesting. Now, a settlement isn't necessarily an admission of guilt, but for a long time in American culture, I think that that's really what it meant. And DeShaun Watson has said that he was going to take all of these cases to court and fight them all individually to prove his innocence and to clear his name, and that settling was never something that was on the table for him, but lo and behold, it was. 20 of the 24 women he settled with, in fact. Only 4 women remain with lawsuits. Those seem like they will go through in civil courts. So what does this all mean? Now, my first thought is exactly what I just mentioned. A settlement, it almost feels like an admission of guilt, and it feels like the first time that DeShaun Watson has acknowledged that there was some kind of inappropriate behavior. Now, whether this settlement actually means that or not, that's kind of up for interpretation. They don't technically admit guilt, but that's certainly where the public's perception is going to go of the whole ordeal. So I think him agreeing to settle with these women, I think, is a definitely step in the right direction, at least for him admitting some kind of accountability for this. Now, obviously, it's not to the extent that a lot of people would like to see, but at least we're getting that far and we're getting a start. Now, the really interesting aspect of this is, what does this mean for the NFL season going forward? It has been pitched that the NFL is suggesting a 1-year suspension for DeShaun Watson. I personally believe that they should go a little bit further than that, especially if he's starting to settle these things in court, out of court, with what could be considered an admission of guilt. I would personally like to see it be a little bit closer to what Trevor Bauer got, that 2-year suspension. There was a lot more gray area in Trevor Bauer's case than there was in DeShaun Watson case. There was more women. There was more concrete evidence of wrongdoing. The Bauer case has a lot of things going on in it that make a lot of people feel a certain way about it. While I don't agree with that summary of what happened, I do think that there is at least a little bit more cause for pause in the Bauer case than there is for this. This seems very clear-cut. What DeShaun Watson did was despicable, it was evil, and he needs to be punished for it. And 2 years feels a lot more in line with what he did than just 1 year personally. Now, the thing that came up in my mind is when I heard the Players Association, this is their job, this is what they have to do, is going to fight the suspension for DeShaun Watson. My first thought was, as somebody who's been in a labor union before, back in an old job of mine, you wonder where those union dues go. And if I'm an NFL player, I've kept my nose clean, I've made my money, and I got to pay all this money to the union. And I look and I see that this is what my union dues are going to defend. They're going to defend an alleged sexual predator, and DeShaun Watson, a serial sexual predator at that. That's given me a little bit of cause for pause when it comes to paying my union dues this upcoming month out of my paycheck. It's a bad look, man. And I'm sure there's conversations in the locker room league-wide, far outside of just Cleveland, thinking, this is what we pay the union all of this money for. And this is going to be no small thing. They're going to an independent arbitrator who's going to weigh in on what she thinks Roger Goodell should do for the suspension. But at the end of the day, it really is all a wash because it's going to be Goodell's decision at the end of the day. And no matter what this independent judge rules, he is the judge, the jury, and the executioner in the NFL. He always has been, and he seems to always will be. So what does this all really mean? Now, say DeShaun Watson gets suspended for a full season. We see him come back next year, ball out. Are we just going to forget about this? I think with the settlement and what this means for his legacy, this is even more cemented as a part of who DeShaun Watson is, at least in the public's perception. I don't think he'll ever be able to get away from this with the settlement. Not that I thought he would before, but like I said, it feels like an admission of guilt, at least somewhat, and it sucks that might be something that gets him off with a lighter punishment because we're not going to have to hear all of the details that come out during these civil cases. Those women did all sign NDAs with this settlement, if I remember correctly reading the article. So to think that he might get away with this, at least in somewhat of a sense, it really does suck because the NFL has done a lot, like I mentioned last episode, to kind of combat this reputation that they weren't out to protect women and things like that. And they certainly have faltered in the past, but blowing this feels like it could be kind of a nail in the coffin kind of moment for the NFL. But just wait, because DeShaun Watson isn't the only NFL persona to be under fire this week alone for sexual assault of some kind or sexual harassment. Washington Commanders owner Dan Snyder was subpoenaed by Congress to talk about an alleged sexual encounter that he had with a young woman that says that she harassed him when she was working for the team. He didn't show up. I believe the subpoena came after he didn't show up to the initial hearing. But again, another headache for Roger Goodell of this kind during his tenure. He is a bullet sponge, it seems like, for the NFL. He's the guy who takes all of the licks. For some reason, Dan Snyder is the one on trial, and Roger Goodell is the guy in there taking all of this heat from Congress. So we got congressmen shit-talking each other from both aisles, talking about why are we wasting our time. Then this side saying, oh, we want to be the guys that get them. Not to even dive into that whole ordeal that goes on every single day in Washington, but I want to focus on a lot of the conversations that I've been hearing around this whole case and people saying, this is going to be the nail in the coffin that makes Dan Snyder sell the team. No, it's not. Folks, there was a report that came out that he was keeping 2 books and essentially stealing money from other NFL owners so that it didn't have to go into revenue sharing, and they didn't do shit about it. Now, these NFL owners, they're billionaires, they're businessmen at the end of the day. They don't care about many things, I don't think. I think you have to be pretty detached from reality to have that much wealth. But if they care about one thing, it's their own pockets, and it's their checkbooks. And if Dan Snyder can mess with their money and get away with it, that tells me he's never going to have to sell that team no matter what comes out in this congressional report or this congressional trial, whatever you want to call it. Because he stole from them, essentially, and they still didn't do anything about it. Now, does that mean that the owners don't care or they think that making somebody sell their team is an infringement on some kind of rights? Because the owners do have the power to do that. If 24 owners, 75% of them vote to make Dan Snyder sell the team, he has to sell the team to the highest bidder. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. We've seen something similar to this in the NBA with the Donald Sterling saga. But they won't do it. And either they don't care that Dan Snyder's stealing money from them, or they're afraid that if they go and they exile Dan Snyder from the NFL, who's going to come for them next? What does Dan Snyder have on all of these other guys that we don't know about? And that's immediately where I think everyone's head should go, because if heads aren't rolling for the kind of shit Dan Snyder is doing to literal billionaires, there has to be something deeper going on. And I don't want to be a conspiracy guy, but it's not hard to read the writing on the wall with what's going on in the NFL right now. I think it's crystal clear. If you can steal money from other billionaires as a billionaire and get away with it, there has to be something deeper going on. And it just adds another layer to the total shit show that is the NFL right now. It has not been a good week PR-wise. I'm sure Roger Goodell will figure it out because he seems to always do it. But I don't know. There could be some interesting stuff to come out. Hopefully, Daniel Snyder answers the subpoena and shows up and has to testify, and we can maybe learn a little bit more. But as of right now, I think everybody should be kind of reading between the tea leaves and trying to figure out what exactly is going on with this situation in Washington. because it smells bad, man. You can smell it from a mile away. It's just not a good look for the entire NFL. And before we move on to the next topic, I want to just remind everybody on YouTube to remember to like and subscribe. Everybody on Spotify, go ahead and hit that like button. If you're on Twitter, make sure you follow us at Around the Show SP and at Kyle Showalter for myself, at _BMills23 and at Christian Haas 19 for all the guys on the show. All your guys' support really means the world. We appreciate you guys tuning in as we want to continue to grow this thing, get bigger and bigger, and hopefully take you guys along the ride with us. So make sure that we're liking and subscribing so we can help this thing grow. And then real quick, we're going to go ahead and just roll into what the next topic is, and the New York Yankees. I predicted they were going to be third in this division this year, and I don't think I could have possibly been more wrong. I'm going to go ahead and pull up their Fangraphs page as I talk right now, but this team has been a completely different beast this year, and it has completely stunned me. As somebody who didn't believe in the team based on what I saw last year, it's not that they seemed uninterested, because I don't think you get to be in Major League Baseball without being dedicated and loving baseball and wanting to go out there and win every single night. But I think there are teams and personalities that are better able to capture what they're looking for in a ball club that goes out there and just is a bunch of dogs on the field. And last year, the Yankees were not that. They seemed more like the analytics darling kind of a team, a team of a bunch of guys put together, not really considering anything outside of their stats, which I think is, even as an analytics guy, somebody who loves to look at the underlying numbers and things like that, you can't build a baseball team that's going to be together for 162 games based strictly on what you see on a spreadsheet. You need to go out and get personalities that gel and people that work together. At the end of the day, this is a workplace. Every single night, that dugout is an office. And if you got a bunch of guys in there that personalities don't gel, they don't get along, you got half the guys, wanting to go out and drink wine and eat crackers on a Sunday, and the other half want to go out on Saturday night and get hammered. It's an interesting dynamic, and I think it's something that's really difficult to balance and something that not a lot of people talk about. You have guys in their 30s with families and all these extra responsibilities on one side of the team. And then on the other side, you got a bunch of 21, 22-year-olds just coming into money for the first time in their lives. They want to go out, do whatever. That's something that needs to be actively managed on every single clubhouse. And I think the teams that are successful are the ones that manage that best. And the Yankees, in that regard, in the team, not the players, what the team is a completely different beast than last year. And I think if you had to point at one thing, I think you have to point at Josh Donaldson, man, the bringer of rain. He's a guy who is all fire. He's all gas, no brakes. He'll get in your face. He'll talk shit. He doesn't care who you are, what your reputation is, what you've done in this league. He's going to go out there and try to take your head off every time he's in the box, every time you're lined up across from him. And I love that. As a guy who loves to watch intensity in this game and passion and all of that, Josh Donaldson perfectly embodies that. And I think he's brought an extra, not necessarily an extra level, but he's brought a chip on the shoulder to this team, essentially, that has elevated them into that next level. And at 52-18 this year, the Yankees are far and away the best team in baseball this year. And that's not something I anticipated saying at all. This is a team that I figured would finish maybe 85, 86 wins. I just didn't see the improvement. Because last year, when things got tough, they just seemed to always fold. And that's just not the case this year. And I think you can point a lot of that towards Josh Donaldson. And obviously, Aaron Judge is having an unbelievable MVP caliber season. If the season ends today, he's your AL MVP. Playing center field, hitting seemingly a homer every single night. But for me, it's the fire these Yankees have. I've had the privilege of watching a lot of their games this year on MLB TV, and you can just feel it when you watch these guys. Like, they're out there grinding. It's a bunch of dogs out there on the field. It's far and away from, say, a team like the Angels, who have had a lot of struggles recently. They walk out there defeated, like a team with their tail between their legs sometimes when they get late into these games. Yankees don't care, man. They don't care if they're down 10 or up 10. They're going to go out there and try to shove it down your throat every single time. And as a fan, you can't help but respect it, even as somebody who has never rooted for the Yankees in their life. And I think that's going to be, if they push into October and potentially go out all the way to the World Series, I think when we look back on this team, especially people who are watching a lot of the games, namely Yankees fans, that's going to be what they point to, is the feel of this team is so different from years past where it seemed like they just didn't have that edge to them. I don't know if it's Donaldson. They brought Isaiah Kiner-Falefa in. They lost Gary Sanchez. I don't know what it is, but the pitchers are pitching, the hitters are hitting, the fielders are fielding, the coaches are coaching, and everything's going right. They're just winning ball games, and it feels like they finally have figured the formula out, and I'm curious to see where this team ends up in October. And folks, as we film, the NBA draft is in progress. Got it on the living room TV. Can't wait to pop back out there and finish the draft coverage, but I had to get in here, get this episode recorded so we can get it out to you guys. But we have to talk a little bit of basketball. It's not going to be about the NBA draft. It's going to be about what seems to be the team that dominates headlines no matter if they're good, if they're bad, if they're somewhere in between, if they have the best player on the planet, or if they have maybe the quickest fall from grace in terms of a superstar on the planet. And of course, that's the Los Angeles Lakers. And they're back in the news cycle because one particular ex-teammate of LeBron James seems to be disgruntled and ready to move once again, folks. That is Kyrie Irving. It really seems like there's some steam picking up that Kyrie Irving might end up playing in the purple and yellow next year. And as somebody who's on record, huge Kyrie Irving fan, my favorite basketball player of all time, I would absolutely love to see this. And this isn't somebody who's a Lakers fan at all. Never called myself a Lakers fan and never will, even being from Southern California. I feel like if I haven't started by now, it's a little bit too late to jump on the bandwagon for sure. But you'll definitely catch me watching more Laker games if Kyrie's out there for them. He's the perfect player to play with LeBron James. I've said it back when he was in Cleveland with him. I've said it when he left. They just work well together. It's almost like an extension of LeBron on the court, like big brother, little brother. And that's not a commentary on the talent. Kyrie Irving is a one-of-a-kind player in NBA history. We've never seen a guy with his skill set before. I'm not sure if we've ever seen a player more skilled than Kyrie in the history of the game when you talk about shooting, his ball handling, his ability to finish. It seems like he doesn't have gravity sometimes when he goes up, the way he's able to stall himself in the air, get around defenders, and make layups. He's remarkable. I could talk about Kyrie all day. But I just love the fit so much, especially when you consider getting him with Anthony Davis. Obviously, the elephant in the room in this whole situation is Russell Westbrook. Now, there's a couple of ways that this deal could take place for the Lakers, and the first of which is probably the least likely. That's that Kyrie Irving takes less money and chooses to sign in Los Angeles. He'd have to take a lot less money because they got three guys making boatloads of money in AD, LeBron, and Russ. Maybe they find a trade partner to take Russ's contract on. Who knows what they'll have to pair with Russ in order to get somebody to do that. And at the end of the day, I just don't think Kyrie's going to take less money. He has taken less money to stay with the Nets, but he would have to take considerably less money to make that happen on the Lakers. I just don't see that happening, even as somebody who really likes Kyrie and thinks that he's a great player. I don't have a lot of negative things to say about the person Kyrie, like a lot of people might. I think he's just a different kind of cat. But I don't think he's just going to willingly give up millions and millions of dollars. The more likely option, and I think one that's super intriguing because of all of the storylines it can spurn, is a sign and trade from the Nets to the Lakers. And what does this look like, you might ask? I think you can figure out the picks and the smaller pieces inside of the deal, but I think it centers around a Kyrie Irving and Russell Westbrook package if this were to happen. And this is pure speculation, obviously. And in this case, we get two former teammates reuniting, and that's obviously LeBron James and Kyrie. And then the much more interesting one would be Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. And this is where I think it falls apart. I really don't think that this is a possibility, just like I don't think Kyrie's going to take less money. But how awesome would it be to watch KD and Russ team back up? Maybe that's what Russ needs. Maybe that'll get him back to playing like himself. Go play in New York. Go do his thing out there. Who knows? I'm curious to see what you guys think. Make sure to let us know in the comments below on YouTube. Shoot us a message on Twitter if you're listening on Spotify, all that. But I really don't know. This seems to be picking up real steam. Adrian Wojnarowski, ESPN's lead reporter, he's out here talking about saying that this is a real thing. This is gaining real traction. And I just don't know, because of the money situation surrounding Russ, how it could possibly happen. But if it does, you'll certainly catch me watching a lot of Lakers games this year. I definitely would be hyped up about that. Even though it was a quick one tonight, I had an absolute blast getting on here, doing what I love to do, just talking about sports. I wish I had my buddies here, Christian and Brandon. Hopefully we'll be back next week. It was a little bit weird talking into the camera lens, just kind of talking to myself in here, being alone with my thoughts, but it was a nice little throwback to where this whole thing started back when it was just me in the same back room, no lights, no cameras, just me and a microphone. So it was an absolute blast to kind of revisit that a little bit in kind of a 2.0 model. Make sure if you're on YouTube that we're liking and subscribing. Make sure on Twitter that we're following at Around the Show SP and at Kyle Showalter _BMails23 and Christian Haas 19. On Spotify, make sure to leave us a like and then leave some comments down below on the YouTube channel. What do you think about what the Lakers are going to do, potentially bringing in Kyrie? How we feeling about the Yankees? All that good stuff. And folks, we will see you guys next week.